Number 1.
Since the age of 3, our daughter has been acting strangely in the middle of the night. We would wake up in fright to see her either standing at the end of our bed or beside one of us just staring with her head down. We brush it off because we believe she just don't want to wake us up, fearing she may get into trouble. Over time, she stopped, and on the odd occasions, she would call for us because of a bad dream. With some comfort and hugs, she usually goes back to sleep. However, on one of them nights I came into her room after she was yelling out for me because of a bad dream. I tried comforting her, but she would not let me leave. So I laid next to her and waited until she fell asleep. Then I would go back to my bed. As I was tired, I fell asleep myself in her bed. I was then woken up by the sounds of her whispering to something I couldn't make out. Then, the next thing she said was a loud "Yes," followed by a single thump sound just above her in the ceiling. I jumped. I asked her who she was talking to. She then cried because I woke her up. She was sleep talking the whole time. I once again brushed it off. It may be a possum or a cat or something in the roof. Everything had stopped after that. Up until yesterday, that is. At about 2 a.m, I was woken up by a loud sound. It sounded like someone throwing a ball at our window. The sound came from the back of our house, which is where our daughter's room is. The sound was followed by our daughter screaming and crying. Her cry was an urgent, "I've hurt myself" or "I'm hurt" kind of cry. As I rushed into her room, I see her standing in the middle of her bed in tears, screaming, "There is a man crawling and he went under my bed," pointing the direction of her wardrobe. I knew no one was under her bed because the space between her bed and floor is very little, which would make it impossible for anyone to go under. However, I could not ignore the fact that I heard the loud sound earlier. So I went through the whole house, checking all the rooms, making sure all doors are locked and if any windows were broken. Nothing. No signs of anyone trying to break in. I tried putting her back into her bed, but she was not having any of that. From here on, she stuck beside me like glue. Even after I allowed her to sleep next to me and I got up to get a drink, she would still follow. She fell asleep holding on my hands tightly. After my wife returned from work this morning, I told her what happened. She went to see our daughter's room and called for me as soon as she turned on the hallway light. She asked me where our daughter was pointing where the man was crawling. I pointed where it was, and then my heart sank when I saw what looks like a handprint on the carpet. The carpet was cleaned the previous day and I didn't see it the first time when I went into her room because I rushed in and turned on the light, and it's not as visible if you look directly down to it. With our daughter's room lights off and the light from the hallway on, it lit up the handprint at an angle which made it more visible. I think our daughter will be sleeping in our bed tonight. Here is a picture of the handprint. Here is another photo of the handprint. Though it may not look like it, the handprint is slightly bigger than any of ours. Update. So, my wife and kids got home late after a birthday party. Our daughter had already fallen asleep in the car on the way home. My wife carried her straight into her bedroom despite what had happened the previous night. I didn't stop her because I had already fallen asleep myself. At 1:14 a.m, I was woken up by our dog barking near my daughter's room. This video shows that the dog stopped barking when I checked up on it. At 1:30 a.m, while still looking through the window, I hear our daughter crying, so I started recording and walked into her room to see she's still fast asleep. At around 3 a.m, I woke up to see our daughter standing just outside our bedroom. I don't know how long she's been standing there. I got up, we went to get a drink and brought her back to my bed. At 3:43 a.m, we both were still awake. She starts looking at the entrance to our room and hide under our blankets. I then start asking what she sees.
I'm scared. There's nothing. Stop hiding. I said the dog is the monster. It's a dog. It's the dog is the monster.
At 4 a.m, we still couldn't sleep. I asked her where the monster is. At 12 p.m, finally woke up and wife tells me our dog is limping. There is something wrong with his back leg. We're taking him to see a vet tomorrow if he isn't better. Update. Just went to take the trash out before going to work. I noticed the top part of our fence broken. I don't know about you, but if I wanted to go onto the roof without a ladder, that's one way to do it. We'll be heading to the police station after work to show them this. Number 2. I grew up in rural Michigan and rode the bus to school every morning. We lived in a house at the bottom of a hill on a country road. My bus stop, however, was at the top of the hill after you passed my house. The story I'm about to tell you happened when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I woke up one morning and got ready for school like I usually did. My bus stop picked me up around 7 a.m, right when the sun was starting to come up a little, but there were still spots of darkness deep in the woods. I was the only kid who was picked up at the bus stop, so I would stand at the edge of the woods and wait until the bus came. My mum or dad would have to drop me off about 5 minutes before the bus came and hightail it to work in order to make it there by 8. It's not that they felt completely comfortable doing this, but they didn't have many options. We lived in a safe area, or so we thought, and the bus arrived on time 99% of the time. So they weren't too worried that anything would happen to me in the 5 minutes I was left alone. I'm standing there, cold as shit, waiting on the bus to come, watching the sunrise slowly in the sky. It's still a little dark out, but yet bright enough for me to see what's around me. I saw the lights of the bus in the distance, on time as usual, and he came to stop right in front of me. My bus driver, Mrs. Teresa, opened the door and said, "Good morning," and gestured for me to hop on. I walked to my seat, put my stuff down, but noticed that the bus wasn't moving. Mrs. Teresa still had the door ajar, and she just sat there, leaning slightly out of her seat, staring into the woods. After a good minute or so, we were off and on our way to school after picking up a few more kids. Arriving at school, Mrs. Teresa escorted us in, which is something she never did, and I remember seeing her slip into the office and talking to one of the secretaries. I went through my regular school day and was picked up by my dad in the car rider line, as usual. When he picked me up though, he started asking me all kinds of questions.
Bus pickup go okay this morning?
And,
did any car stop or blow the horn at you as you waited?
Strange questions that he never asked me before. The next morning, my parents didn't take me to the bus stop. Mum dropped me off at school before going into work at a later time. This continued, alternating a drop-off by my mum or dad for the remainder of the school year. At the same time, I noticed they changed my bus stop. Years later, I found out why my bus driver went into the school that day and why my bus stop was relocated. When Mrs. Teresa picked me up that morning, She saw a man standing in the woods behind where I was, just staring at me. She alerted the school secretary, who alerted the transportation office for the school district, and then the police. The police investigated and found some items wrapped in a t-shirt back in the woods. These items included a hunting knife, rope, a rag or washcloth, and a tape. The police never found out who that shit belonged to, but my bus driver, my parents, and the police felt certain that whoever it belonged to had the worst intentions, probably for me. I think about this often and wonder what would have happened to me had my bus driver been a few minutes late, or had she not noticed the man standing in the woods after I boarded the bus. Because of this incident, the school district changed my bus stop to be located right in front of my house. That way, I could stay in my house until the bus pulled up. No more standing by the woods for me. I resumed riding the bus the next school year. Number 3. Okay, so a couple of years ago, I had a really traumatic experience that messed up my nerves real bad. I was 15 years old, 18 now, and my sister, who was 3 years older than me, was really sick and decided to stay home from school one morning, which meant I had the walk all to myself. By the walk, I mean the 10-minute walk from our small 5-bedroom house to the not-so-lively bus stop. I had never walked by myself, so I was really scared, but I didn't want to make my dad late to work since we really needed the money. I sucked it up after telling my sister to never speak to me again and started out into the thick fog with the flashlight my mum had given me. Now, in order to get to the bus stop, I had to cross a swamp, which wasn't really deep, but it had plenty of frogs, bugs, and raccoons that my sister and I often stopped to play with, minus the raccoons, of course. As I stepped onto the piece of wood that led to the other side, I heard footsteps and rustling. I quickly peeked over my shoulder and saw a man in a bright red sweater with the brightest blonde hair my 15-year-old eyes had ever seen. I was confused as to why he was back here, since no one but my sister and I ever took this way, but I shrugged it off and made my way to the other side of the swamp. Now, after I get across the swamp, there is a set of railroad tracks I have to cross, and there's always a train that my sister and I usually climb over, since it never really moves. But when I got close to it, I heard shuffling and whistling behind me, and when I turned around, there he was again, just looking at me. I sized him up really quickly and realized that if he was going to try anything, all I could do was run. I was 98 pounds on a good day and I was only 5'2". This man looked to be at least 200 pounds and he towered over me. I quickly climbed up on the train and slid through the empty space between the two cars. I sighed as I glanced behind me and didn't see the man, so I continued my walk the way I did with my sister. When I got to the corner that was across from the bus stop, I whistled into the yard of the corner house before the giant white German shepherd that used to always walk us to school leaped out and jumped around me. Since we didn't really know his name, we called him Bus. We named him when I was 11 and my sister 15. When Bus and I got to the stop, I opened up my lunch and let him eat my PB&J sandwich. We sat like that for a while as I rubbed his fur, but then, out of nowhere, his ears perked up and he started to growl really low. I got really scared since my stop was across from the woods and I thought a wolf was getting near, but then I saw him. The same man. He was at the corner that I stood at not too long ago, except this time he stared at Bus with a frightened look in his eyes. I felt my chest tighten as I sat on the ground and curled up into Bus, not daring to look at the man. 3 minutes later, Bus stopped growling, and I glanced at the watch on my wrist which read 7:40. 5 more minutes. I sent Bus off as I saw the bus ride coming through the fog. Once it stopped, I wasted no time climbing on and swiping my keycard before greeting the small old lady that gave my sister and I cookies every morning. Just as the doors were closing, a body squeezed through the doors and the bus driver quickly opened them. I tried not to let my shock show as the man that I was certainly sure had been following me sat across from me, cheesing his annoying smile. 2 minutes into the ride, he started saying how pretty I was and that he liked my pants, and he asked me what school I went to. I lied and made up a name, and he asked me my grade. When I told him I was only a freshman, he smiled and said,
"A senior? So you're almost legal."
He laughed and scooted up in his seat, gaining a reaction from the lady who gave me cookies. She slid over next to me and said that I was only a freshman, barely legal. His smile disappeared, and he just stared at me as I fiddled with my folders. Eventually, my stop came, and I think the man knew because as the bus stopped in front of the school, he stood up and looked at me expectantly. The bus driver looked to the back and asked the man if it was his stop. I still hadn't stood up. He looked at me for a while longer before saying no and sitting back down. At this point, I'm pissing my pants. I quickly jumped up and said it was my stop before exiting quickly. When I got to the crossing light, I saw the man standing at the gas station down the corner, and all I remember is saying fuck the light and sprinting across that street to the school building. When I got home, my sister told me Bus, the German Shepherd, had been run over by a car and killed. Not only that, but someone dropped my watch off at our house, saying that I dropped it in front of the school. All I know is I never want to meet that man in the red sweater again. Number 4. The names in this story have been changed. It was December and Christmas was right around the corner. It was late, around 3 AM or so. I was sick, so I was in a strange sleep schedule at the time. I was bored, and none of my friends were online, so I decided to venture into the site called Omegle. I went on there quite often at the time, mainly to troll people, but tonight I decided to have some actual conversations with people. Big mistake. So I decided to talk to people under the anime tag, because people on there seem generally cool for the most part. Of course, there's always horny teenagers looking for a girlfriend no matter what tag you're on. I eventually found someone who isn't a bot and who doesn't immediately ask ASL, meaning age, sex and location. We'll call her Azula. Azula asked me what my favourite anime is, and I jokingly said, Fat Albert. I know I said I didn't want to troll people, but I couldn't help myself. A conversation ensues after that about anime and such, and she seems like a genuinely decent person. She then asked for my email. I gave her my spam email knowing that there's no real harm in giving her that, so we continue our chat in a Google Plus Hangout. She starts to ask to video chat. I declined, telling her that I don't even video chat with my real friends, but she keeps on persisting and I keep telling her no. I was starting to think that she was actually some pedophile. I told her that I don't feel comfortable revealing my face to anyone online, and I really don't want to voice chat. She then says that she will send me a picture of her face if I send her a picture of mine, so I let her send hers first. I then did a reverse image search to see if the photo was fake. Nothing came up anywhere, so I knew that it wasn't fake. So, reluctantly, I took a picture of myself and sent it to her. I figured it couldn't do any harm. She then kept persisting to video chat. I kept telling her no. I then turned my computer off because I was tired and annoyed. I didn't really think much about it, but I was planning on blocking her the next day. A day later, I got on my computer and was about to block her, but as soon as I got on, she messaged me immediately. At this point, I thought she was either stalking me or had no life and was at her computer all day, so I went ahead and talked to her. She apologized for being pushy and explained that she didn't have many friends and just wanted to get to know me. I said it was fine. So, we talked about anime, as well as video games and such, a normal conversation for me. The next day, we talk again. She wants to video chat. I told her that I'd voice chat, since I did that all the time. Once we were in the voice call, she kept asking me to turn my camera on. Her camera was on, so at this point I was sure she wasn't a 40-year-old man. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable doing that. She said that she wanted me to video chat to make sure that I wasn't a 40-year-old pedo. My voice was quite deep, so I understand why. So again, reluctantly, I turned my camera on. After that, everything seemed to be okay. I could tell there was something wrong, but I figured she was just socially awkward. After that, things were okay for a few weeks. But one day, she randomly told me that she had a crush on me. I told her that I don't do online relationships, and she got really depressed after that. She kept saying how every guy, 5 in total I believe, has turned her down and she's really sad about it. I didn't really know what to do at this point. I felt really bad for her because I knew how it felt to be rejected and how awkward it is to stay friends with them afterwards. So I made one of the dumbest mistakes of my life. I said that I actually liked her too. Nowadays, there's no way in hell I would have done any of this, but I was 14 at the time. I was young and dumb, so just keep that in mind. So, I basically was in a fake fabricated online relationship at this point. I didn't consider her my girlfriend, and only one of my friends, we'll call him Eric, even knew about her existence. In fact, one day he was in a group chat with us. That's when things started to get strange. In the group chat, we had a decent conversation, but it got weird after I left. Azula started asking Eric really personal questions about me. Eric gave her the runaround, telling her that she should be asking me this stuff. She was asking questions like what my last name was or where I lived, etc. Eric didn't tell me about this, but I saw it in the group chat. I thought it was really strange that she would ask him these questions, knowing that I would see them when I got back. Anyway, at this point she kept asking me what my last name was. Remember, Azula was very persistent, and she wouldn't stop asking a question even if you declined. So I found out that she goes on Facebook and searches every person with the same first name as me. My name is fairly common, so there is a lot of people on there with my first name. I couldn't believe it. She spent days trying to find my Facebook. I've never seen so much dedication. Red flags were definitely going off at this point. She eventually finds my Facebook and sends me a friend request. I decline it because I was very pissed that she was invading my privacy. She then started messaging me on Google Hangouts asking me about my family members. She literally wrote down a list of them all, asking them how they were related to me. I got really scared at this point. I knew I had a stalker and I did not know what to do. I blocked her on everything and deleted everything on the net that had my real name in it. I had officially went rogue. She eventually emails me on another email of mine. Don't ask me how she found it. I honestly have no clue. Perhaps it was on my Facebook before I deleted it. Anyway, she spams that email with countless messages per day. I blocked her and the email stopped. I didn't hear from her for about a month. Then, one day, I accidentally deleted an important email, so I went to my trash to recover it. In my trash were hundreds of emails from her. I nearly soiled myself in fear. The last email was from that day, so in morbid curiosity, I read some of the emails. What I found was nothing short of frightening. She told me that she thinks there's something wrong with her, and that she enjoys and gets off on the pain of others. And she said that she knows where I lived, and was going to fly over here and live with me. I was so scared at this point. I was honestly worried that she was going to kill me. I deleted that email account and have been off the grid ever since. Number 5.
I used to go to a beauty school that only had classes 8 to 12 hours, 3 days a week. This resulted in me being left at a train station late at night by myself. I won't deny that my actions with strangers seemed stupid to others. I tend to let them entertain themselves and think I am just a stupid little girl. This, in my opinion, lets them relax enough to think that I'm too stupid to notice their intentions. I always just thought it was a good talent that kept me safe for years. Anyway, enough. Back to the story. This story takes place a few years ago. I had no car at the time, so I had to wait to take the bus late at night. It was a lovely night, and like I have done for years, I started taking pictures of the moon. Pouting because my camera wasn't getting good shots, I turned around and sat down. The entire time, I was aware of a man standing a few bus shelters down and leaning against one of the rails. At the time, I thought nothing of him. Usually there's a little voice in my head that tells me something's wrong, but this voice didn't pick up anything other than how the man was oddly positioned. I ignored the fact that he didn't get on the bus when it showed up and vanished. For the next 3 nights, I kept seeing someone out the corner of my eyes. The first time, there was someone sitting under a bus shelter where I took the picture of the moon. I took my usual pictures and went home. The second night, the person was waiting, leaning against the wall. It was too dark to see who it was, and I decided this night I would wait while talking on the phone. Then the third night, the man sat next to me. I had seen him leaning against the same place as the first time, and the little voice in my head said, "Pretend to not notice him so he won't hide." I still wasn't sure that this was the guy who always hid just out of sight. However, since all the figures did the same thing, they were probably the same man. They always sat or stood in an odd position while watching me. I started thinking that this man must know my schedule because I only go to school 3 days a week and I've noticed the figure every time. I thought about calling my boyfriend to keep me company, but I knew that he was already asleep. The next night, the man spoke to me for the first time. I had been pretending to be really into my Candy Crush game. I acted startled. "Hi, oh my god, where did you come from?" We both laughed. I took the chance to get a good look at his face, and I smiled. He looked like an everyday guy, and he began asking me if I could spare a few cents for the bus ride home. Now, I'm a nice girl, and sometimes that infuriates my boyfriend. I instantly tell him yes, thinking, God, I would hope someone helps me if I was out late at night, a few cents short for a bus ride home. I pull some money out of my bra, and it's $3. "Looks like you're in luck. I have $3 on me." I smiled and handed him $1. He asked me if I was sure and looked worried that he was taking the only money I had on me. I often use this trick to make people think I'm too pointless to rob. I keep the real cash deeper in my cleavage and the same $3 easy to reach. He smiled, thanked me, and got on the same bus as me. He paid for his ride with cash and sat in the back of the bus. I sat in the middle and went back to playing Candy Crush. I got off at my stop and made my way home to my apartments. The next night he talked to me again. He told me that I was a beautiful woman and asked me if I had a husband. I smiled, knowing it was a pickup line. I implied that I had a husband and that we lived together, and I used my boyfriend's name. We were getting married anyway in a year, so it wasn't really a lie. He proceeded to ask me if I had a lot of lovers since I was so beautiful. I told him that I believed in being a virgin until marriage. "So you're a good Christian girl, then?" he asked. "Fuck no, dude. I'll land a curse on your ass in an instant." I winked and we both laughed. I noticed how he kept looking me up and down. I tried to end the conversation by going back to my phone, but he kept asking me more questions. I kept responding with half-truths and humor. He asked me for my number because he said he loved how open and honest I was. I told him that I didn't give out my number to people that I didn't know. He then proceeded to call me mean because he just wanted to be friends. By now, my husband was aware of where I was and who I was talking to and what this guy was asking me. He was ready to pick me up, but I had 2 minutes before the bus came. Nothing was going down tonight, and all 3 of us knew it. My bus came, and the man watched me get on. I watched him leave the station as my bus pulled away. The first thing my fiancé said when I answered the phone was, "Who the fuck was that guy, and why did you talk to him?" I replied with, "I told you I think I have a stalker situation going on. I thought he just wanted to fuck me or something. He was probably only interested in me because I told him I was a virgin." My fiancé then made sure I was in the house and safe before hanging up.
Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader here. I hope you enjoyed listening through that. If you did, please slap a like, and if you haven't already, why not subscribe to be notified of future uploads? If you have a story you want me to narrate, please send it to my email in the description box. Once again, thanks a lot for listening. However, I could not ignore the fact that I heard the loud sound earlier, so I went through the whole house checking all the rooms, making sure all doors are locked and if any windows were broken. Nothing. No signs of anyone trying to break in. I tried putting her back into her bed, but she was not having any of that. From here on, she stuck beside me like glue. Even after I allowed her to sleep next to me and I got up to get a drink, she would still follow. She fell asleep holding on my hands tightly. After my wife returned from work this morning, I told her what happened. She went to see our daughter's room and called for me as soon as she turned on the hallway light. She asked me where our daughter was pointing where the man was crawling. I pointed where it was. Comfort and hugs. She usually goes back to sleep. However, on one of them nights I came into her room after she was yelling out for me because of a bad dream. I tried comforting her, but she would not let me leave. So I laid next to her and waited until she fell asleep. Then I would go back to my bed. As I was tired, I fell asleep myself in her bed. I was then woken up by the sounds of her whispering to something I couldn't make out. Then the next thing she said was a loud "Yes," followed by a single thump sound just above her in the ceiling. I jumped. I asked her who she was talking to. She then cried because I woke her up. She was sleep talking the whole time. I once again brushed it off. It may be a possum or a cat. And then my heart sank when I saw what looks like a handprint on the carpet. The carpet was cleaned the previous day and I didn't see it the first time when I went into her room because I rushed in and turned on the light, and it's not as visible if you look directly down to it. With our daughter's room lights off and the light from the hallway on, it lit up the handprint at an angle which made it more visible. I think our daughter will be sleeping in our bed tonight. Here is a picture of the handprint. Here is another photo of the handprint. Though it may not look like it, the handprint is slightly bigger than any of ours. Update. So, my wife and kids got home late after a birthday party. Our daughter had already fallen asleep or something in the roof. Everything had stopped after that. Up until yesterday, that is. At about 2 AM, I was woken up by a loud sound. It sounded like someone throwing a ball at our window. The sound came from the back of our house, which is where our daughter's room is. The sound was followed by our daughter screaming and crying. Her cry was an urgent, "I've hurt myself" or "I'm hurt" kind of cry. As I rushed into her room, I see her standing in the middle of her bed in tears, screaming. "There is a man crawling and he went under my bed," pointing the direction of her wardrobe. I knew no one was under her bed because the space between her bed and floor is very little, which would make it impossible for anyone to go under. Number 1. Since the age of 3, our daughter has been acting strangely in the middle of the night. We would wake up in fright to see her either standing at the end of our bed or beside one of us just staring with her head down. We brush it off because we believe she just don't want to wake us up, fearing she may get into trouble. Over time, she stopped, and on the odd occasions, she would call for us because of a bad dream. With some